The emperor carefully selected several noblewomen for Crown Prince Peiheng, but he insisted on choosing his crown princess through a lottery. My father accidentally discovered that the lottery box had been tampered with, secretly switched it back, and in the end, I was chosen to marry into the Eastern Palace. I had thought that my years of devotion would finally be rewarded, but instead, I was met with a heart-wrenching nightmare. On the day when the concubine Ruanli passed away, Peiheng, drunk, burst into my chambers. His bloodshot eyes were filled with hatred. Su Wanyu. If you hadn't switched the name on the slip, Li Er would have been my legitimate wife. She wouldn't have died in such misery. It's all your fault. When his icy fingers clamped around my neck, I finally understood that from the moment I was chosen, my tragic fate had been sealed. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day of the palace selection. I jolted awake, cold sweat soaking my back, barely able to stand. The suffocating sensation from being choked still lingered, making it hard to tell if it was a dream or reality. Miss, what's wrong? The maid Yingxing hurriedly supported me. I clenched my palms tightly, the pain bringing me back to my senses. Looking up, I saw my father, the Minister of Rites, about to enter the hall for the final inspection before the ceremony. Father! I rushed forward and grabbed his sleeve. You error? He turned around, a hint of confusion in his brows. What's the matter? I leaned close to his ear and whispered a few words. My father furrowed his brows. Are you sure? I stared into his eyes and nodded solemnly. My father looked at me deeply, didn't ask any more questions, and finally agreed. Your Highness, in such a situation, it would be best if Lear did not participate. A soft voice came from behind me. I turned around and saw Ruanli tugging at Peiheng's sleeve with her fingers, her eyes red and tearful, looking pitiful. Peiheng immediately frowned. What's wrong? My status is low. If I'm chosen, others will surely say the prince is showing favoritism. If I'm not chosen. Her voice grew softer and softer. Then she suddenly choked up, afraid she couldn't bear the mockery of others. As she spoke, her body swayed slightly, as if she were about to fall, and Peiheng quickly reached out to support her waist. With me here, who dares to mock you? Peiheng's voice was cold and harsh, but his gaze was uncharacteristically gentle. Ruanli leaned against Peiheng's arm, but her eyes darted past his shoulder and landed on me with a triumphant glance. Why don't you? She suddenly straightened up, looking innocent as she turned to me, her lips curling into a mocking smile. Why doesn't your highness just choose Sister Su as the crown princess? After all, everyone in the capital knows that she has loved you for years and goes to the Eastern Palace every day to bring you soup. The noble women around us all covered their mouths and giggled, their eyes glancing at me. In my previous life, I would have been ashamed and embarrassed at this moment. But now, I just smiled calmly and lowered my eyes without saying a word. Upon hearing this, Peiheng glanced at me indifferently. Let fate decide. In truth, Ruanli was not a noblewoman but the daughter of a hunter. Last autumn during the hunt, Peiheng fell from his horse and was injured in the mountains, where she rescued him and cared for him for 3 days. Upon returning to the palace, Peiheng insisted on keeping her by his side and even considered making her his official consort. A hunter's daughter is worthy of being the crown prince's consort? The emperor was so angry he smashed the teacup. Hunger. Don't be foolish. Later, the emperor carefully selected several noblewomen for Peiheng, but he insisted on drawing lots to choose a consort and insisted on including Ruanli in the list of candidates. He knelt outside the imperial study for an entire night before the emperor finally relented. Since you insist so strongly, let her participate in the selection. If she is not chosen, it is the will of heaven. The ceremony began, and the ceremonial official announced, Please, Crown Prince, draw the sign for the Empress. Peiheng stepped forward, reached into the golden lacquered sign box, and handed one to the ceremonial official. The ceremonial official announced loudly, "Ruanli, daughter of the Ruan family, is the crown prince's official consort." The entire hall erupted in chaos and whispers. Ruanli covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "Your Highness, is this truly fate?" Pei Heng's eyes were filled with tenderness. "It is heaven's will. Su's sister. I never expected this." Ruanli turned to me, her gaze flickering between me and Pei Heng. "Your Highness, how can I possibly take the position of crown princess? Perhaps I should give it to Su's sister instead? It is the will of heaven, how can it be taken lightly?" Pei Heng shot me a meaningful glance. "Su Wanyu has her own destiny." Ruanli heard this and a hint of triumph flashed in her eyes. She feigned weakness and said, "Your Highness is right. It was just that I was being too naive." She covered her mouth and coughed lightly, looking as though she was about to faint. "Please draw the concubine's name." When the ceremonial official presented the green jade tube, my heart skipped a beat. In my previous life, this had never happened. Before I could react, Pei Heng had already hurried over to Ruanli. "What's wrong? Have you been standing too long?" Seeing Ruanli nod, Pei Heng picked her up and carried her horizontally, then said to Li Dequan, "You draw." With that, he turned and walked toward the back of the hall without looking back. After Pei Heng left, the head eunuch Li Dequan drew a slip and handed it to the ceremonial official, who announced loudly, "Chusher's daughter Wan is to be the prince's concubine." The Chu family's daughter, standing beside me, knelt down in surprise and thanked the heavens, while the other noblewomen all looked disappointed. After the ceremony, the noblewomen left in small groups, some deliberately passing by me. Some people have been deluding themselves for so many years. And in the end, they didn't even get a concubine. That's right. She's been running to the East Palace so diligently every day. And now it's all for nothing. If you ask me, the crown prince must have grown tired of her fawning ways long ago. "Shoo, keep your voice down, her father is the minister of rights." I let these sharp words pass by my ears, but the corners of my mouth curled upward slightly. This ordeal is finally over. On the carriage back to the mansion, my father pondered for a long time before hesitantly speaking. Though I also don't want you to marry into the Eastern Palace. I know you've long admired the crown prince. Why did you have me remove your name from the selection tube today?" I lifted the curtain and gazed at the receding palace walls, whispering softly, "It's nothing. Your daughter just suddenly doesn't want to marry him anymore." I lowered the curtain and turned to my father with a smile. "You and mother have always said that General Liu is a suitable match for me. This marriage, your daughter has agreed to it." My father was startled by my words, then smiled and patted my hand. Good. I will go and inform the Liu family immediately." My obsession with Pei Heng was the biggest joke among the noblewomen of the capital. That year, I was 7 and selected to be a princess's companion in the palace. On my first audience with the emperor, I was so scared I cried outside the hall, huddling behind a vermilion pillar and trembling. "Why are you crying?" Young Pei Heng stood in the glow of the sun, his features as beautiful as a painting. "Now that you're in the palace, I'll protect you." Saying this, he pulled a piece of pastry candy from his sleeve and slipped it into my hand. The candy was so sweet it was almost sickening, but it made me stop crying. From then on, I followed him like a little shadow, from the imperial study to the martial arts hall, from spring to winter. One day, the empress saw us and joked, "This girl, Wan Yu, is so fond of our Heng. I think we should just let her marry him." Pei Heng blushed and turned away, but I remembered those words deeply. Later, when he casually praised the pastries from Li's shop, I got up before dawn to buy them for him. when I heard he was busy with official duties and couldn't sleep due to a headache. I searched through medical books to learn how to make a soothing soup and brought it to him every day. When he fell from his horse during the autumn hunt, I was so worried I didn't sleep for several nights and almost followed the guards into the mountains to look for him. The Sioux family's daughter is waiting outside the Eastern Palace again. As the eldest daughter of the Minister of Rights, how could she treat herself this way? The entire capital is laughing at me, calling me foolish and silly. But they don't know that when Pei Heng had a high fever that wouldn't subside, he faintly clutched my hand and called out "Ayu." They also don't know that on the day of my coming-of-age ceremony, when he slipped his jade pendant into my hand and told me to keep it safe, the tenderness in his eyes. It was this bittersweet affection that made me willingly indulge in this beautiful dream for 10 whole years. Until Ruanli appeared. He began bringing her in and out of the palace, teaching her to write and paint, even giving her the inkstone I had given him. He would grow anxious if she covered her chest and furrowed her brows, rushing to the Imperial Medical Bureau to summon a physician and personally brew medicine for her. He even knelt outside the Imperial study all night long, just to beg for a chance for her to be selected as a princess consort. My heart was filled with bitterness and resentment. After all, I was the one who met him first. Why does he now only have eyes for Ruanli? Until the day of the palace selection in my previous life, when Pei Heng unexpectedly drew my name, I knelt before the hall, weeping with joy, believing that the Buddha had heard my prayers and granted my wish. But I failed to notice that on the high platform, Pei Heng's expression suddenly turned icy cold, as if he had drawn not his beloved, but a death warrant. I sewed my wedding gown with joy, but on the night of the wedding, he didn't even lift the veil, only coldly saying, "As you wish. The title of Crown Princess is yours. The rest, you need not even dream of." With that, he turned and left. The red candles burned out, and I sat alone all night. I didn't understand. If it was fate, why did Pei Heng treat me this way? The next day, a small palanquin was carried into the Eastern Palace, and Ruanli entered the mansion as a concubine. At the concubine-taking ceremony, Ruanli wore a water-red silk dress, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the teacup. This concubine requests the crown princess to drink the tea. The teacup clattered to the ground, and the scalding tea splashed onto her silk stockings. She let out a startled cry and retreated into Pei Heng's embrace, revealing her ankles, which were reddened. "Su Wan Yu." Pei Heng's expression hardened instantly, and he shouted harshly, "Can't you even hold a cup of tea? Are you deliberately making things difficult for Li Er?" I stared at the ceramic shards still steaming on the ground, clearly having been knocked over by her. "Your Highness, please see clearly, I did not." Pei Heng cut me off, his anger growing. Could it be that Li Er intentionally burned herself? "You show no remorse. Go outside and kneel in reflection." He picked up Ruanli horizontally, holding her as if she were a fragile treasure. The Eastern Palace was in chaos. Eunuchs rushed to summon the imperial physicians, while palace maids carried medicine boxes back and forth. I knelt on the cold stone bricks outside the hall, watching the imperial physicians rush back and forth over that minor burn. My knees had gone numb from kneeling, and by the time I returned to my chambers, I had a high fever. When Pei Heng heard about it, he only sneered, "You're just putting on a show." A few days later, the Empress somehow found out that we had not consummated our marriage and summoned Pei Heng for a scolding. That night, he kicked open my door, grabbed my chin, and said, "You dare to report me to the Empress? Su Wan Yu, you really are something. Well, I'll give you what you want." Before I could defend myself, he pushed me onto the bed. His movements were brutal, as if he were punishing me. Afterward, he held my chin and forced me to drink a bowl of abortion potion. "Remember, you are unworthy of bearing my child." The medicine was bitter, trickling from the corners of my mouth to my neck. I stared at the swaying tassels on the canopy and suddenly burst into laughter. It seemed that the Buddha had granted my wish, but only to show me that a marriage forced by others might not end well. Later, I was banished to the most remote courtyard in the Eastern Palace, while Pei Heng had eyes only for Ruanli. Ruanli was frail, so he ordered the best tonics to be sent to her courtyard. Ruanli feared the cold, so he personally hunted a white fox to make a fur coat for her. Later, Ruanli fell ill. The imperial physician said it was due to emotional distress, and her illness was incurable. Pei Heng stayed by her bedside day and night, his eyes filled with a panic I had never seen before. He sought out a folk remedy from somewhere, insisting on using my blood as an ingredient to brew medicine for Ruanli. When he cut open a vein on my wrist, he didn't even flicker an eyelash. For Ruanli, he took my blood from my wrist 49 times. But in the end, she still died. She died in the first snowfall of that year, in his arms. That night, he kicked open the door to my chambers, reeking of alcohol, his eyes bloodshot. Su Wanyu. If you hadn't switched the name tags back then, Li Er would have been my legitimate wife. She wouldn't have died in such misery. It's all your fault. He choked me, his grip so tight it felt like he was trying to crush my throat. I struggled to speak, but no sound came out. In the dizzying suffocation, I finally understood everything. It turned out that he insisted on selecting a concubine by lottery merely because Ruanli was of low birth, wanting to give her a legitimate opportunity to be chosen. He had already tampered with the lottery box, but his father accidentally discovered it and secretly switched the names back. Since I was the one chosen, he believed it was I who had manipulated my father to interfere, causing him to miss his chance with Ruanli. Therefore, in this lifetime, to avoid repeating the same mistake, I instructed my father not to interfere with the lottery box, but simply to remove my name from it. Since he had gone to such great lengths for her, I would grant him this one wish. 7 days after the grand ceremony, my mother entered my room holding a sandalwood box, slowly unfolding the marriage contract and gift list on the table. Her eyes sparkled with joy, as if she were extremely satisfied with this match. Lu Chen is a young man of fine character who has admired you for years. He is a suitable match for you. I lowered my eyes and smiled. Daughter will obey her mother's arrangements. Having lived a second life, I have grown indifferent to love and passion. To marry someone who cares for me is already a blessing from heaven. If that person happens to truly love me, it would be an extra blessing. Just as we were speaking, Inxing lifted the curtain and entered. Miss, the Jinxiu merchants have received a new shipment of fashionable jewelry. Would you like to take a look? I nodded. That's fine. I was just going to fetch the materials I ordered earlier. As soon as I entered the room, my eyes fell on a gold-plated, jade-inlaid hairpin. Miss Su has excellent taste. The shopkeeper carefully picked up the hairpin and handed it to me. This was rushed here from Jiangnan by express messenger. There's no second one like it in the capital. I took the hairpin and held it up to the copper mirror. It's indeed exquisite. Wrap it up for me. Just as I was about to pay, a cold voice suddenly rang out from behind me. Su Wanyu. It's been 7 days. Where have you sent the calming soup I ordered? The copper mirror reflected the tall figure of Pei Heng, his brows furrowed, and a faint bluish-black hue under his eyes. Greetings, Your Royal Highness. I turned and bowed. This servant has been busy preparing for the wedding. I couldn't spare the time. Pei Heng's gaze fell on the hairpin in my hand, and his expression softened considerably. Oh, you've started preparing so early. Just as I was about to reply, Ruan Li's delicate voice suddenly interrupted. Oh, this hairpin is so beautiful. Su's sister. She stared intently at the hairpin in my hand. This hairpin is exactly to my younger sister's taste. Would you be willing to part with it? I gently stroked the flowing tassel at the end of the hairpin. Miss Ruan. When buying things, one should follow the order of arrival. I have already chosen this hairpin. Ruan Li's eyes immediately filled with tears, and she bit her lip as she looked at Pei Heng. Your Highness. Pei Heng frowned and said in a deep voice, it's just a hairpin. If Lear likes it, just give it to her. Why be so picky? Seeing that I had no intention of giving it up, he raised his hand and threw a bag of gold leaves onto the table. Today, this hairpin is mine. The shopkeeper's forehead broke out in a cold sweat as he fidgeted nervously. I didn't want to put the shopkeeper in a difficult position, so I placed the hairpin back into the silk box, since your Highness insists. Then I shall give it to you. The shopkeeper looked grateful. Miss Su, you're here to pick up the fabric you ordered a few days ago, right? He took out a piece of crimson silk embroidered with golden phoenixes from the cabinet, which had already been prepared according to your specifications. As my fingertips touched the silk, Ruanli leaned in again. This red silk is so beautiful. If it were made into a wedding dress. Miss Ruan, why do you always covet others' things? I coldly interrupted. This is the fabric for my custom-made wedding dress. I've already paid the deposit. Pei Heng had been standing aside, watching coldly, but upon hearing this, he suddenly raised his gaze. His eyes fell on the crimson brocade, and a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes before turning into understanding. Su Wan Yu. He curved his lips slightly, a hint of pleasure evident. You are merely a concubine in the Eastern Palace, you have no need for such a formal red. He paused, then added as if granting a favor. But, if you like it, I will allow you to wear it once at a private banquet in the Eastern Palace. Ruanli heard this and dug her fingertips into the red silk, but dared not speak, only looking at Pei Heng with a look of grievance. Your Highness must have misunderstood. I smiled as I ran my fingers over the phoenix pattern embroidered in gold thread on the silk. When did the servant say she wanted to marry into the Eastern Palace as a concubine? Pei Heng froze, his smile freezing on his face. What did you say? I met his gaze and spoke slowly. This servant is to marry the son of General Ding Yuan, Lu Qin, in a grand wedding with 8 palanquins. A proper marriage. As his main wife. Pei Heng's pupils contracted sharply, and he suddenly grabbed my wrist with such force that it nearly crushed my bones. Impossible. I have chosen you, and the Ministry of Rights has already recorded you in the Imperial Registry. How dare you? Your Highness. Please be careful with your words. I struggled to free my hand. The concubine you chose was clearly the daughter of the Chu family. Pei Heng's face turned deathly pale as he stumbled back half a step. No. This can't be. He seemed to suddenly remember something and shouted harshly. Someone! Bring Li Dequan to me. In no time, Li Dequan rushed over, rolling and crawling. But before he could stand steady, Pei Heng grabbed him by the collar. On the day of the concubine selection, who was chosen by the side concubine slip? Speak! Your Highness. Li Dequan trembled uncontrollably. It was Chu Wan, the eldest daughter of the Chu family, the Minister of Revenue. The edict was personally approved by you. What about Su Wan Yu? Pei Heng's voice was hoarse. Su. Li Dequan glanced at me secretly, unsure of what to say, and could only answer with a trembling voice. Miss Su was not selected. Pei Heng was struck as if by lightning, his entire body stiffening in place. How could this be? I clearly. Pei Heng muttered softly, his gaze toward me dark and unclear. As he left, his steps were unsteady, and the hem of his brocade robe swept across the threshold, causing him to stumble and nearly fall. Your Highness. Ruanli saw this and hurried forward to support him, but her fingertips had barely touched Pei Heng's sleeve when he suddenly pushed her away. The force was so strong that she stumbled backward several steps, her back colliding with the shop door with a loud thud. Her eyes stung with pain, But she dared not approach further, clutching her handkerchief tightly as she stood there, watching Pei-heng walk away without looking back. In those tear-filled almond-shaped eyes, a fleeting glimpse of venom flashed. That night, the Eastern Palace was ablaze with light. The palace attendants on night duty trembled as they reported that the crown prince had flown into a rage for some unknown reason and smashed all the porcelain in his chambers. The next morning, Pei-heng suddenly burst into the Su mansion. His eyes were bloodshot, clearly having not slept all night. The servants dared not stop him, only watching as he stormed all the way to the backyard and stopped in front of me. Su-won you. He was panting heavily, as if he had rushed here in a hurry. I have already requested permission from the emperor this morning to take another concubine. He raised his chin slightly, as if this were a great favor. I intend to take you as a concubine. If you agree, I can make an exception and allow you to wear the proper red attire upon entering the mansion. Your Highness is joking. The red attire is reserved for the legitimate wife. A concubine must not dare to usurp such honor. I bowed slightly in respect. Pei-heng's eyes lit up. You're agreeing. Your Highness has misunderstood. This servant was merely discussing the proper etiquette with you. I raised my eyes to look at him, a smile playing at the corners of my lips. Besides, this servant has already been betrothed to Lu Chen. Impossible. He grabbed my wrist, his voice suddenly rising. I don't believe you. I calmly took the golden marriage contract from my sleeve and unfolded it slowly in front of him. Pei-heng's pupils contracted sharply, and he unconsciously loosened his grip on my hand. He stumbled back half a step, his face growing pale. How could this be? He muttered, suddenly snatching the marriage contract and flipping through it repeatedly, as if searching for any signs of forgery. Su-won you. He looked up suddenly, a flash of panic crossing his eyes. But he quickly regained his arrogant demeanor. Even if you're engaged, do you think Lu Chen can protect you? His father is just a lowly military officer, while I am the crown prince of the current emperor. Your Highness, please watch your words. I interrupted him calmly, staring straight into his eyes. The Lu family has served as generals for 3 generations. My grandfather accompanied the founding emperor in expanding the empire, and my father suppressed the rebellion in the northern frontier. The emperor personally bestowed upon him the title of Ding Yuan. Are you questioning the emperor's rewards with your words just now? His expression froze, clearly not expecting me to bring up the emperor. Just as the standoff was reaching a stalemate, my father hurried over, bowed, and said solemnly, Your Highness, it is inappropriate for you to intrude into a subject's residence. Pei-heng snapped back. The Minister of Rights has quite the air of authority. Do you dare to lecture me? My father bowed respectfully. If your Highness has any business, you may send a formal invitation. Breaking in like this will reflect poorly on your reputation. Pei-heng was speechless, his expression shifting between anger and frustration. Finally, he swept his sleeves and left, tossing back a parting shot. Su-won you. Don't you dare regret this. After he had gone, my father sighed deeply, took a bamboo stick from a box in the study, and handed it to me. Actually, when I went to check the day before, I found that the box for drawing the concubine's name contained only your name. But your mother and I saw that you had finally come to terms with it, and we didn't want you to waver again, so we didn't tell you. I took the bamboo slip, my fingertips tracing the words Su-won you on it, and a chill ran down my spine. These characters were all too familiar to me. They were clearly written by Pei-heng himself. No wonder he reacted that way yesterday. Considering everything that had happened recently, I could almost confirm that Pei-heng had also been reborn. But why? Why does he want to keep me by his side in this life? Yue, will you blame us? My father called out to me with concern. I snapped back to reality, clutching the bamboo slip as I turned toward the tea stove by the window. Father, rest assured, Your daughter won't make the same mistake again. I lifted the lid of the stove and threw all the bamboo slips inside. The charcoal in the stove was burning fiercely, and the bamboo skewers were quickly burned to a crisp. After lunch, my mother suddenly grabbed my hand. Late Moon, accompany me to the general's mansion today. Lady Lu has recently acquired some fine Biluakan tea and has specially invited us to taste it. I paused for a moment before nodding gently. Your daughter would also like to go out and clear her mind. In truth, I knew that the tea tasting was merely an excuse for me to see the young General Lu in person. Though they had arranged my marriage, they could not bear the thought of me marrying blindly, and insisted on letting me see him first before proceeding. Upon entering the mansion, my mother and Lady Lu silently entered the inner hall together, leaving Lu Chen to lead me to the backyard to admire the flowers. I was still pondering how to handle this meeting when I looked up and froze. The young man before me wore a deep indigo-colored robe, with a white jade pendant hanging at his waist. He was so handsome and tall that he seemed to have stepped out of a painting. Upon seeing me, his ears turned bright red, and he fumbled with his bow, nearly tripping over his own sash. Sue girl, are you well? He stammered, his eyes fixed on the ground, unable to meet mine. I couldn't help but smile. Lu Xiaojun, there's no need to be nervous. I don't eat people. He finally looked up, his clear eyes shining brightly, but his cheeks were still flushed, as if I had bullied him. Lu Chen and I chatted in the garden for a long time, discussing poetry and literature, and the scenery of the frontier. At first, he was still stammering, but when he talked about his expertise in military strategy, his eyes shone like stars. Watching him speak so enthusiastically, I couldn't help but smile. He finally realized what I had done, his ears turning red. He pressed his fist to his lips and cleared his throat, then returned to his shy demeanor. From that day onward, this young General Lu began to visit the Su mansion every few days. One day he would bring a box of freshly baked almond cookies. The next day he would present several branches of camellias still dripping with morning dew. And the day after that he would arrive with a few exquisitely crafted trinkets. Even though he was already engaged in front of me, he was still flustered at the slightest provocation, unable to say more than a few words before lowering his head to tidy his already neat collar. Once, Yingxing couldn't help but tease him. Little General Lu, whenever you come to our mansion, you never have a moment to spare, do you? Upon hearing this, his hand holding the teacup trembled, spilling tea onto his robe. He turned bright red with embarrassment. I was just... He stammered for a while before finally placing the silk box he was holding on the table and turning to leave. I suddenly remembered I have something to do at the camp. I opened the box and found a white jade hairpin carved into the shape of a pear blossom, exquisitely crafted. Beneath the hairpin lay a flower pattern note, neatly written, "The pear blossoms in my courtyard have bloomed, more beautiful than ever before." I smiled as I traced the elegant characters, suddenly realizing that such a simple, ordinary life could be so refined and charming. 8 days passed as usual, and the small items Lu Chen sent me gradually filled my dressing table. The white jade hairpin carved with pear blossoms, the grass-woven grasshopper, the flower-patterned note with a rabbit drawn on it. Each one reminded me of the faint blush on his ears when he handed them to me. One day, I went to the merchant's shop to pick up some newly ordered jewelry. On my way back, I took a shortcut and happened to pass by the side gate of the Eastern Palace. Suddenly, I heard Ruan Li's frantic voice from inside the gate. "You said this rebirth was foolproof. Why is Pei Heng now obsessed with Su Wanyu?" Upon hearing the words rebirth, I stopped in my tracks and approached the gate. Ruan Li didn't truly love Pei Heng. This relationship was nothing more than a task she had to complete. How ridiculous. In my previous life, my heart was stolen by such a complete and utter deception. As soon as I stepped through the gate, Yingxing greeted me. "Miss Lu Xiaojun is here." waiting for you in the back garden. I composed myself, gathered my emotions, and finally made my way to the back garden. Lu Chen saw me, his face flushing red as he pulled a gold-embossed marriage contract from his robe. I wrote it 10 times. This is the neatest version. I took the marriage contract and unfolded it, nearly laughing out loud. This wasn't a proper marriage contract at all, it was clearly a short narrative poem. From the moment I saw him 3 years ago and fell in love at first sight, to the pear blossoms we admired together a few days ago, every detail was written down on 3 full pages. At the end, there was a round rabbit drawn, with the words promise of eternal love written beside it. Lu Xiaojun, I said, deliberately putting on a serious expression. A marriage contract isn't written like this. If the Ministry of Rights sees this, they won't approve it. He hurriedly reached out to take it back, then I'll go rewrite it right away. No need. I carefully tucked the marriage contract into my sleeve, lifting my eyes to meet his sparkling gaze. This marriage contract. I really like it. My wedding with Lu Chen was set for the 6th day of the 6th month, the same day as the imperial wedding at the Eastern Palace. That day, I was in my room sorting through my dowry when a commotion suddenly erupted outside the courtyard. Su Wanyu. Pei Heng's voice came from outside the door, filled with suppressed anger. Open the door! My fingertips paused, and before I could get up, the door was violently pushed open. Pei Heng stood outside, reeking of alcohol, his eyes bloodshot. Are you really going to marry that Lu guy? I instinctively took 2 steps back. Your Highness is drunk. Pei Heng's eyes lit up, and he stepped forward to grab my wrist. You care about me, don't you? I struggled but couldn't break free, coldly replying, Your Highness, please control yourself. Control myself? He laughed softly, his eyes filled with emotion. You've never spoken to me like this before. Let her go. Lu Chen's voice came from outside the door, cold and steady. He stood on the corridor, his brows furrowed with a rare intensity. Pei Heng narrowed his eyes, not letting go but pulling me closer to him instead. Lu Chen, who do you think you are to give orders to this prince? Lu Chen's hand rested on the hilt of his sword. The marriage between this servant and Wanyu has been registered with the Ministry of Rights. The 3 letters and 6 rituals have all been performed. Wanyu is this servant's fiancé. It is only natural for this servant to protect her. Pei Heng sneered. What is a piece of paper worth? If I were to go to the emperor now and request an annulment, do you think this marriage would still hold any weight? Lu Chen's eyes darkened, but he remained calm and composed. If your highness insists on this, I am willing to immediately request to be stationed at the border and exchange my military achievements for the emperor's approval. His words clearly meant that even if he had to go to the battlefield and die in the sand, he would protect this marriage. Are you threatening me? So what if I am? Pei Heng's eyes flashed with anger, and Lu Chen's fingers tightened around his sword, turning slightly white. The situation became tense. My gaze shifted between the 2 of them. Your Highness, may I speak with you alone? Pei Heng hesitated for a moment before finally letting go. Lu Chen frowned at me, but I shook my head gently, signaling him to relax. He remained silent for a moment before finally stepping back, leaving only Pei Heng and me in the room. As the door closed, the anger in Pei Heng's eyes faded slightly, replaced by a complex emotion. What do you want to say? I looked at him and spoke slowly. Your Highness, do you remember what you said when you choked me in the last life? Pei Heng's body stiffened, and his eyes suddenly became much clearer. You said, if you hadn't changed your name tag, Lear would have been my official consort. Now that you are about to marry Miss Ruan and your wish has come true, what else are you dissatisfied with? Pei Heng's expression grew even uglier, and he staggered backward. You also. Yes. I looked straight into his eyes. I too had been reborn. Therefore, in this new life, I did not wish to repeat the past. Pei Heng's eyes were filled with shock and regret, which eventually turned into a struggle that was almost painful. I don't know why. Every time I get close to Ruanli, it's as if an invisible force is controlling my thoughts. I can't control myself. That night I was drunk, and I don't know what came over me. I felt like I was being controlled by something. I never intended to kill you. After you died, I regretted it deeply. I stayed by your spirit tablet for 7 days straight. That day I was drunk, and when I opened my eyes, I found myself back at the grand ceremony. Do you know how happy I was? I specifically asked my father the emperor to allow me to draw a concubine, and the only name in the box was yours. I don't know where I went wrong. He went on and on, speaking faster and faster, his voice growing softer, as if he were explaining himself, or perhaps confessing. Finally, he took a step forward and grasped my hand almost pleadingly. These past days I've thought a lot and come to understand many things. I've finally realized that although I am grateful to Ruanli for saving my life, the person in my heart has always been you. Please give me another chance. I want to make it up to you. If you're willing, I'll go report to my father the emperor right now. Depose Ruanli, and make you the official concubine. Once I ascend the throne, you'll be the empress, the most honored woman in the entire realm. Your Highness, I have already died once. I pulled my hand away and gently stroked the wrist that he had cut open and bled in my previous life. So some things simply cannot be made up for, and they cannot be undone by making amends. Pei Heng froze in place, the light in his eyes slowly fading. Finally, he turned away in embarrassment and staggered away. Outside the door, Lu Chen still stood quietly on the corridor. Seeing me come out, he took a step forward, gripped my shoulders with both hands, and examined me up and down. Late Moon, are you hurt? I shook my head and suddenly noticed that his palms were completely drenched in sweat. I'm fine. I patted his hand and whispered reassuringly. It's all over now. On the day of the wedding, red decorations lined the streets for miles. I wore a bright red wedding dress, with a phoenix embroidered in gold thread shining brilliantly in the sunlight. As the wedding palanquin reached halfway, there was suddenly a commotion ahead. Pei Heng rode up on a horse, dressed in red wedding attire, his eyes bloodshot. As he approached, he dismounted and stood directly in front of the wedding palanquin. Come out and see me. Lu Chen immediately reined in his horse and blocked him with his sword. Your Highness, today is your wedding day. Why have you come here instead of welcoming the bride at the Eastern Palace? Pei Heng didn't even glance at him, only staring intently at the curtain of the palanquin. I know you can hear me. I lifted the curtain, and the phoenix crown and pearl curtain swayed gently. Your Highness, please return. I don't believe you could be so heartless. Pei Heng's Adam's apple bobbed, his voice trembling with emotion. He took a step forward but was stopped by Lu Chen's sword scabbard. Your Highness, I believe I made myself clear that day. Please return. After saying that, I was about to lower the curtain. Wait. Look at this first. Pei Heng hurriedly pulled out a book from his bosom, his voice trembling. Last time I told you, every time I got close to Ruanli, I felt like I couldn't control myself. I finally know why. Yesterday, I found these in her box. She's not human. She's a demon. She schemed to get close to me, to control me, all just to become my official consort and complete her so-called mission. Pei Heng's voice was hoarse. The things she did to hurt you were not my intention. Come with me. I can give up the position of crown prince. I can give up everything. I only want you. I closed my eyes and threw the book back into his arms. Your Highness, this won't change anything. Your Highness, A piercing scream echoed in my ears as Ruanli stumbled toward us. Her hair was disheveled, her face covered in blood, and she no longer looked as delicate as she once did. She resembled someone who had just escaped from prison. "Your Highness, you said you only had eyes for me and would take care of me for the rest of your life." She threw herself at Pei Heng's sleeve, begging him to take her back and marry her. "I'll really die." Pei Heng's eyes were filled with disgust and fear as he violently pushed her away. "Get out of here. You demon!" Ruanli staggered backward, suddenly bursting into maniacal laughter. "It's all your fault. Su Wan Yu." Pei Heng immediately frowned. "What's wrong?" A cold gleam flashed in Dong Ho's eyes, and the dagger in her hand stabbed straight toward me. "A you!" In the blink of an eye, Pei Heng pushed Lu Chen aside and stood in front of me. The dagger sank deeply into his chest, and blood instantly dyed his wedding attire even redder and more vivid. Pei Heng staggered to his knees, but still clutched Ruanli's wrist tightly, preventing her from coming any closer. He looked up at me, blood foam trickling from the corner of his mouth. "A you. In this life, I finally protected you." Ruanli looked at her blood-stained hands and suddenly screamed, "No. Give me another chance. Don't." Her body began to twist and turn, growing transparent. Lu Chen shielded me behind him, drawing his long sword. "Demon." Ruanli's voice abruptly ceased, and her entire body dissipated like smoke in the wind, leaving only the blood-stained dagger clattering to the ground. Screams erupted all around. Amidst the chaos, Pei Heng's hand slowly dropped, the light in his eyes fading away. Lu Chen stepped forward, his warm palm covering my eyes. "Don't look." But I still saw it. Pei Heng's final lips formed the words, "I'm sorry." 10 days later, Lu Chen and I held our wedding ceremony once more. In the wedding hall, he gently lifted my veil, his voice trembling with emotion. "You err. I've finally married you." I lifted my head to meet his tear-filled eyes and gently brushed his reddened eyelids with my fingertips. "Fool." Later, we lived happily ever after, with children and grandchildren filling our home. The Eastern Palace had a new ruler, and no one spoke of the past.